This is Maury Miller.
And then
September
also,
3rd, and
I found out...
Virginia Lindley. And so first I'm going to ask you, Virginia, where and when were you born?
I was born in Gary, Indiana, at the Methodist Hospital.
And when?
October the 4th, 1928.
28. And who were your parents?
My father was William Henry Lindley, and my mother was Emma Cleo Wells Lindley.
And did you have brothers or sisters?
I do have. My one brother is John W. Lindley. He was a nickname Jack, and more people know him by Jack. My sister is Marilyn Jean Lindley Edwards, and she has a daughter, Nancy, who is married with 2 sons.
Okay. And how old were you when you came to Marshall?
I came, let's see, my father worked at, he had a Texaco station in Gary, and then he switched to the steel mills because they paid more. And then he had an accident in the steel mills, and he fell and hit his head. And so he decided maybe the steel mills wasn't for him. So then he came back to rural route Marshall, Illinois, to farm on his mother's farm.
And how old were you then?
Probably between 1 and 2.
Okay, so you're just a very small child.
Toddler.
And where did you live then?
Now?
No, then when you moved.
Okay, rural route 1 Marshall.
Okay. And tell me about, then you grew up there?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, what was the neighborhood like?
Very helpful, it wasn't secretive, but they tended to their own business, and if you needed help, they were there, and if they needed help, they'd come for you.
Okay, good. And
it was in the Ohio vicinity, which is south and west of Marshall.
And did you have close neighbors?
Oh, very, within quarter to a half mile.
Okay, so there were other children to be playmates?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Most of them younger than I.
Well, let's talk about when you were a child. Did you have chores around the farm?
Oh, absolutely.
What things did you do?
Chores always came first. Whatever needed to be done. And each of us had something different, or else we would work together. And like feeding the animals, watering the animals, seeing that they had bedding, working in the garden, canning, mowing the yard, cleaning the house.
Well, it sounds like they kept you busy.
They did. My grandmother said, "Don't ever say the word bored to me. If you do, I'll find you something to do."
I bet she would, too.
Yes. She was older, but she was very well in doing what she did. She crocheted and tatted and made quilts and made clothes and everything that a good farm woman needed to do.
Well, in addition to chores, let's talk about playtime. What were some of your play activities?
Usually we had to make our own. We would play ball, we would play handy-hand over the house. In the wintertime we would play in the snow or skate on the creek. Or just regular things that children did.
Were there neighborhood activities, church activities?
Not very often, because everybody kind of tended to their own business and their own families, and not too often. We would go to church, and we had school activities that we entered in.
Okay. Well, let's talk about school. Where did you go to school?
All right, in this vicinity there was an Ohio church and an Ohio school, separate. And my first 8 years I went to the Ohio school, and we had various teachers that expected you to learn and tried to teach you so that you would learn. And then on Sunday we had our church service and our Sunday school where we could learn again.
Okay, what are some of the special memories you have about Ohio school?
Well, each teacher was different. Dean Thompson was I can't remember what year he taught. He taught twice, and he wanted you to learn, and if you had any spare time, like my grandmother, he would find something for you to do. And he would say, you can always practice writing. So we would write. And then we had blackboards around 3 sides of the school, and we would go to the blackboard and work out different arithmetic problems or different lessons.
Okay.
Whatever he chose.
And then did you go to high school?
Yes. Went to high school at Hudsonville, and the first year I rode the bus, and growing up on the farm and didn't mingle with the city too much, like West Union or Marshall, I learned that the difference between a country mouse and a city mouse quickly when I started high school.
Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a difference in the way people, in the way the students thought, the way they acted, the way they taught, and
And
they
you,
were pretty
and you
spoiled,
were,
and I
you were
wasn't.
a country mouse. Okay.
I was a country mouse.
Okay. Okay, well, let's talk about what your family did together. What are some of the family activities that you had that you remember?
Oh, well, my grandmother had 8 boys and 1 daughter. And whenever Aunt Margaret would come from Iowa, she lived on a farm, we would all have get-togethers. We got together on Thanksgiving and Christmas and Easter, main holidays, and in between. And when she was young, she had several cousins that she liked in the old York area, and aunts, and she always liked to get together with them, and because she did that, we were associated with them also. And she had a sister that lived in Sullivan, who would come and stay a week at a time on the farm, and she lived in the city, and her husband was a coal miner. But she had a garden, but that was all. She didn't have chickens or cows or anything like that. And so we would cross the Wabash River on the ferry and go over that way to Sullivan and come back the same way. And I was always glad after we got across the Wabash River. It looked to me like it was pretty swift going south.
Okay, well, it sounds like many of your memories, your family memories, deal with meals and food?
Visiting and visiting.
And visiting? Okay.
Yeah, and when they would visit, like these cousins would get together, Howard Jackson was one cousin that we would go to see often, and he would raise strawberries and watermelons, and we would raise chickens and had cows and milk and cream, things like that, and when we would exchange. Whenever we come, he would have things for us, and in the wintertime, to have something to do as he watched television, he would crack out nuts that I picked up, hazelnuts, hickory nuts, walnuts, pecans, whatever I had, he would crack for us.
Okay.
And we would divide. He wouldn't take any money, but we would divide.
Did you have hobbies as a child?
I did have many. Like I said, my grandmother was well versed in things that she did. When I was 8 years old, I started to quilt.
Wow.
Yeah. And I never learned to quilt very well, but she quilted for me, and I did embroidery, I did little tatting, little knitting, mostly I like to work with materials.
What of those things do you still do?
I read a lot.
Okay.
I kind of go in cycles. I have made several quilts myself in my lifetime, and I enjoy doing that. Not the quilting part, but we had a neighbor who was ill from the time she was young, and her mother taught her how to quilt, and she did real well. And she would quilt. Her name was Mary Cormoran, and she would quilt as a hobby or extra money, and she was very good, very good.
Did you have a pet?
Not really. My brother always had a dog, and my sister always had cats. But as far as me having a pet of my own, no, I just shared with theirs.
Okay, so have you always lived then around Marshall?
Yeah, well, I lived in Terre Haute for a while when I worked over there.
Okay, okay. Did you marry?
No,
No,
no.
no. Well, let's talk about then some of the jobs you have had. What do you remember about jobs you've had?
Well, let's see. My first job when I was in high school, I worked behind the lunch counter the last 2 years, so I got my lunch free by working behind the lunch counter. And the money my father gave me for lunch, I pocketed. And then after school, I worked for Hubert and Ruby Ellis there in West Union in their grocery for 25 cents an hour. But I was glad to get it. My uncle had a pool hall across the street, and during the war he worked in a defense plant, and my father would open the pool hall up of an evening, and so while he was in the pool hall I worked at the grocery store. And then in the summertime I worked at the hardware store, Musgrave hardware store there in West Union.
In West Union?
In West Union.
Okay.
And then later, after I got out of high school, I worked around the farm that summer, and then in the fall, my uncle from Chicago, who was a civil engineer up there, he could come down about 3 times a year, and that year I went back to Chicago with him and his wife and his daughter married soon after we were up there together. She married. And so Aunt Evelyn, Uncle Ralph's wife, said, why don't you just stay and see about getting a job here? Because I had planned to go back to the farm. And so about 4 blocks from there was a large grocery store, and they hired me as a cashier. And that was when rationing was, and you had to be very careful with who you give ration stamps and how you took the stamps. And then on the farm, we got 5 pounds of sugar for each person that lived in the household. And so we didn't use a lot of sugar, but we had plenty. Mm-hmm. And we had a very nice neighbor that we loved dearly, and she lived by herself after her daughters was married, and so she just got 5 pounds. And in the summertime, we would ride our bike up to her house, and if she had any chores for us to do, we would help her. And then our grandmother wouldn't let us take any money, so she'd always give us cookies and lemonade. Well, we didn't realize that she was using up her sugar for our lemonade. So one day she gave me lemonade with saccharin. Oh, that was terrible, terrible, terrible. Or I thought at that time, So I went and told my grandmother about it, and she said, oh, I've got 5 pounds of sugar that I'm saving to make blackberry jam with. And she said, I want you to take this up and give it to Bessie Davidson. So I did. And she said she wasn't going to take it. And I said, my grandmother skinned me alive if I come back with it. So she took it, and I said, you call my grandmother and talk to her about it. Well, they did. And finally she kept the sugar. But it wasn't long till the end of the month we got our ration again. And then it was, when we went to pick blackberries, there wasn't very many blackberries. So we didn't have too much blackberry jam or anything.
Okay, and then other jobs?
Let's see, where was I at?
You went to Chicago.
Okay, then this grocery was just about 4 blocks from where my aunt and uncle lived, and I learned the city. My aunt told me how to get around in the city and where to go, and I finally got a job at the Bell Telephone Company downtown. And winter had come. This was a year later, and winter was coming, and I had to I had to walk to the train, ride the train downtown to the station, get off, walk across the Chicago River to the Bell Telephone Company. And that winter, that wind, maybe it always is, but that winter, that wind rain and snow and everything. It was very, very cold. And I had sinus trouble. But anyway, I worked in the office of Bell Telephone there. And then my father became sick with the Lou Gehrig's disease. And so I thought I should come back to the farm and help out, take care of him and do whatever was necessary. So then, in between, I was offered a job at the grain elevator, the Wilson grain and feed and grain elevator, and I worked there for a while. And then I got a job working as a bookkeeper for the Clatfelder Chevrolet agency there and General Motors. I worked for them there for quite a while.
That was in West Union?
In West Union.
West Union. Okay.
And then I learned being kind of creative, I would say. I took lessons in making porcelain and ceramic pieces. And then finally, Lincoln Trail College in Robinson hired me to have a class there in West Union, and I had from 10 to 15 students during the school months. And I enjoyed it very much, and they'd say, well, we can't do that, and I said, you can if you take one step at a time. Don't think about the end result, just do one step at a time and do it well. And they did. And some of them went on then to open their own shops. But like other things, the fascination wore off, and but I myself and my friend Maxine Stepp did a lot of porcelain birds. We made a lot of figurines of porcelain birds, starting with the mold and pouring the liquid in them, mold and setting it up and cleaning them and firing them. We each had a kiln, and we fired them and we painted them. We would look in all kinds of books for ones that we thought were very natural, very pretty, and so we would paint according to them.
And then what would you do with those birds?
I have what I made.
Kept them.
Yeah. And in one class, it was Christmas time, and I suggested that each student make a nativity set. And I got the material and the pieces, and so while they were making a set, I made a set. Well, I already had a set, so I really didn't need it. So I thought, what would be the best place to put that? And I thought, the Glen Home in Terre Haute, the orphanage. So I loaded it up, and I didn't have any straw for the little manger. So I went to my great aunt's down at West York, Illinois, and on the way I stopped at a little lane, and there was some dried weeds there. So I took the dried weeds and made straw. But anyway, I got to the Glen Home, and there was all ages of children. There was one little 4-year-old girl that took my eye, and the little lamb took her eye. And as I was setting up the scene, the little girl picked up the lamb. And the lady there that was over the children told her to put it back down, And I said, no, let her feel it. She has curiosity, and just let her feel it and see how it feels and where it goes in the scene. And so after a few minutes, she put it back and she was satisfied then. So this lady that was over the children, I said to her, there's only one thing that I ask that I would like to see done. On Christmas Day, I'd like for somebody to read the story of baby Jesus out of the Bible and use these pieces to come along and show where they fit in. And maybe they would understand it better than just reading out of a book or somebody telling them. So she promised me that she would. Now, whether she did or not, I don't know. But when the orphanage closed, I often wondered what happened to my nativity set. But I had given it to him. There were no strings attached to it. So I hope he got some good out of it. And while I was there, I looked around, and like I said, it was Christmas time. And the only thing that I saw that referred to the nativity set was a cardboard cutout that they set up. Now, it's the only thing. Now, whether they read to the children or...
But they did have the nativity set.
But they did have a nativity set. Okay. And I thought that if they would use that as an example, that the children might understand it more.
Sure, sure. And then you stayed with Clapfilter Chevrolet?
Yes. And then I studied to become a four-line insurance agent. And so we also sold insurance along with the Chevy cars and trucks.
Okay.
So we had and then Dale Clapfilter, my employer, he was a lifetime diabetic. And because he was a lifetime diabetic, his health began to fail, and he had to close. And then interest rates went up on wholesale. The vehicle that you bought, the interest rate went up to 22%.
Oh, my.
And that was terrible, terrible. So we knew that that might not be in the future. So then we began to push the insurance a little bit more than selling of the cars. But we sold as many as we could, and then he, like I said, became ill. And running with a dog one day, I broke my left wrist and my right ankle. So I was out of commission as far as doing much of anything. And so I thought, now's a good time for me to do something I've thought about doing for a long time. I wanted to make a list of my ancestor grandparents. And so I started out. I could write with my right hand, and that was all I could do. I couldn't walk very well. I couldn't walk at all without a walker, and I couldn't use my left arm. So I did as much as I could do, and then I started writing to different relatives for their information, and they would write back, and I put it together, and this is part of it.
You have it. Good.
And then I found out much history. I found out that Roger Williams, who founded Rhode Island, was my ancestor grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just a minute. That's somebody who wants to talk a long time, I think. No, excuse me.
Okay.
Can you shut it off?
Yes.
Hello? This is Virginia, and I'm at a meeting that George Washington was my 30th cousin. Abraham Lincoln is my 9th cousin. And also that Abraham Lincoln and George were related.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. They went, I didn't bring it with me. I have it documented that goes back to in the 900s, and then farther back than that was a Doomsday Book, and I had to go to England, and I didn't want to do that. I was happy with the information that I had. But I have given several copies of it out, and there was one person that had three children, and down one line is where I'm relation with Abraham Lincoln. The second and third is George Washington's line, and then where they connect. So it's very interesting.
Yes. Well, Virginia, I'm going to ask just some general questions now about your life. And I'm going to ask you, was there a person, as you think back on your life, was there a person or event that was a major influence in your life?
Very much so. My grandmother that raised us, Nancy Hodge Lindley. And the history that went back on her line is really the most colorful, because that's where Roger Williams come in, and Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. But it came on down through that line that was an influence to me because I realized what a hard life they had, yet it didn't seem hard to them at the time, or else they didn't say that it was, but they were pioneers, you know. When you go back to the Doomsday Book, you know that's pretty much, and King Henry I was one of my ancestral grandfathers. But anyway, I have a book that has all of that down in it. Besides, this is more later.
Okay. Well, let me ask you another question.
Sure.
Again, thinking back of the time of history of your life, what particular historical events, maybe local or maybe national, stand out in your mind?
Well, of course, Abraham Lincoln is more colorful, but I liked him more as a person than as a president of the United States. I know he suffered greatly by being president, but I also have been to Hoskinville, Kentucky, where he was born, and the cabin is there that he was born in, on the grounds that he was born. And there's a building there that has been erected, and it has 56 steps up to this building that has a log cabin in it, and it's 16 medallions on the ceiling that says he was the 16th president. And I liked him more as a person than as a president.
Okay. Well, let's talk about events in your life. What happened historically in your life that stands
Well, like
out?
I said, all my life hinges on my ancestors.
Okay, well, let me ask you another question. As you think about all the different inventions and things that have been developed during your lifetime, what modern conveniences do you think have most affected your life?
I'd say the automobile or the airplane.
Okay. If you talked to someone who wasn't from here and described Marshall, how would you describe Marshall, and why would you tell them you live here?
Well, I have lived in the Marshall area from the time that I was 2 to 3 years old, and I'm still living here. And I've learned something all my life about the farms and what it takes to make a living and what is important in my life. And of course, the most important thing in my life is God. And I just live day by day, do what I think is necessary.
Well, Virginia, I want to thank you for coming in today and talking with me. I think you're going to be surprised. The things you talked about, people are going to really want to hear about.